American Renaissance conferences and things like that. And he'd become a bit sort of disillusioned with them, so he then moved into the circles of a neo-Nazi group called, definitely we know that he was a member of a tiny group called the National Socialist Movement, and they were a splinter from a group called Combat 18, a neo-Nazi group. The Combat 18 stood for number one letter of the alphabet is A, and 8 is H, so Combat Adolf Hitler, which gives you a clue about where they're coming from. Now, interestingly, if you look up Combat 18 on the internet, there's a lot of people who say that this was set up by the security services. I don't believe that. But what I definitely think did happen is that the security services heavily infiltrated the group called Combat 18, which is why some people might have sort of recognised him. And I think it's within the circles of Combat 18 and also the National Socialist Movement that he might have met people who might have encouraged him in a bomb-making direction.
Now you say he didn't have the intellect or the savvy to construct these nail bombs on his own. Were these sophisticated devices with timers, or were these just like devices with a fuse? You know, because it is pretty simple to put together a pipe bomb with some.
No, they had timers.
Okay.
They had timers, yeah. And if you think about it, they all functioned as he intended them to do. They all actually went off. Actually, no, the second one, the one in Brick Lane, sort of only partially went off. It went off in somebody's car. But certainly the first one, and the one at Brixton, and the last one did actually function. I think he downloaded some stuff like the Anarchist Cookbook and so on from the internet. But the interesting thing there is when you looked at his movements to see whether he might have worked alone, and of course I attended the trial, so lots of these, because he didn't give evidence, a lot of questions that I would have been screaming to ask weren't asked. Now, if the period where the bombing took place, between the first and the second bombing, you've got the date of the 20th of April. Now, for sad as it is, for neo-Nazis the world over, the 20th of April is a sacred date,
right?
Because it's Adolf Hitler's birthday. And the interesting thing that did come out as the trial is that although he wasn't working that day, they mentioned in his effects that he had a travel card that was dated, a weekly travel card to go on public transport, because he used the train and the underground to get to work, because he lived in Hampshire, a few miles away from London. He had a travel card that started on the 20th of April, so it's obvious that he must have gone somewhere on the 20th of April where he would have probably met other neo-Nazis, but of course because he didn't give evidence, though, that question wasn't asked. But it's highly likely that the one time of the year that you would be sure to meet other people of that persuasion, would be on Adolf Hitler's birthday.
Now, is he still alive today in prison?
Yeah, he is alive in prison, and he when the police first came for him, he said his first thing was, he said when he opened the door to them, he said, "It was me. I did them on my own." Now, after he was in custody for a while, he then said, actually, I'm a member of a group called the White Walls, which I can explain a bit about. Now, you could reconcile the two statements to say, first of all, I worked on my own, and secondly, I'm a member of a group a few days later, just from a basic security blank point of view. That if you're arrested and you say, I did it on my own, and the people arresting you want to believe that, then that allows your colleagues time to escape. But then once they've had time to escape and it's quite clear they're not going to be arrested, then you can then admit that you're a member of a group. Now, around the time that he was arrested, while the bombings were going on, a number of hand stenciled, so you couldn't see the handwriting, communiques were sent using a code word. I think it was a code word Nemesis, i.e. retribution. Using a code word was sent to various media outlets around the time of each bombing, and I don't think he sent them. I certainly don't think he could have sent them all, and that raises then the question, of course, were there other people he was working with? And there's a very chilling document called, I wish I could, at the time, I was in contact, I was interviewed on the media about these things at the time, and if the bombings had continued, I had one TV channel, Channel 4, that was actually going to pay to get somebody to analyse the language, because there was a very interesting document called The White Walls, which is like a manual for race war. And it basically was written by somebody very intelligent with a degree of historical sense, because they knew about things like the 1919 race riots that most fascists wouldn't have even known about. And it was basically saying, that you do a few things, bombs, military action, to encourage a reaction, to then get the state involved. And what you want to do is to increase racial tension. And in some senses, what he was actually doing could be seen as fitting into that, encouraging polarization by fitting into that plan. But I don't think he sent out all those communiques. I don't think he certainly didn't write that document, but I think it may well have been a document that he actually read. And I have a number of ideas as to who might have written it, but without that linguistic analysis, it's difficult to say.
Now you mentioned. Now, have you tried to interview him while he's in prison? Can you do that over there in the UK?
Possibly could. I mean, I haven't. I might do. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody listening to this will now be thinking, right, demand that person doesn't get visiting orders. I do know he was recently. I think his demeanour hasn't improved somewhat, because he was recently given an extended sentence because he attacked another prisoner with a razor blade and so on. But yeah, I mean, one of the really frustrating things, I suppose at the moment I've taken it as read that he was involved, but I don't think, I agree with you, it probably would be a good thing to try to speak to him, because nobody has actually asked the questions that we're asking of him. They just, it's just like a non-issue, whereas it isn't for us. But yeah. So it's a good suggestion.
And it's been so long, he may be looking forward.
Now be willing to speak. Yeah.
Want some attention because he's in there all alone. Does he have family? Is he in contact with anybody? Do we know?
Well, he has a father who he is in contact with. I mean, it's one interesting thing. I'm just looking at some of my notes here that his total income per month was £1,300. UK pounds at that time, and in the 4 to 6 weeks while the bombing was going on, he spent £1,500 on materials. Well, where did he get that money from? Probably not.
Now, you mentioned also too that one of the bombs went off in somebody else's car. Do we know whose car that was and what the circumstances?
Yeah, I think that was. I actually saw that person give evidence. I mean, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and this person. I saw some people give evidence at the Old Bailey, and I thought, no, you're dodgy. I don't believe you. This guy, I did. He was an Irish person, as it happened, and he was walking down Brick Lane on a Saturday afternoon when it's generally empty because the market there, the street market, only takes place on a Sunday. And he saw this bag, and he thought, he had a look at it, and he had a quick look inside, and he thought it might be some kind of tools, so he put it in his car. Put it in his car boot, and he was thinking of taking it, and then he did some shopping and then went back and had another look at it and thought, oh no, that wires, that looks a bit dodgy. So he then walked to the local police station, and as he was near the police station to report this, but what turned out to be a bomb, then it went off. And it was probably the fact that it was in a car when it went off probably, helped And also the fact that there were very few people around. But it sounds weird, doesn't it? But it's like the first bomb, the bomb in Brixton, was actually he put it down somewhere, and then somebody moved it, and then somebody else moved it. Because some people, they see a bag and it looks like quite new, and it's quite heavy. So some people might think, oh well, maybe somebody's left something I can. That might be worth some money.
Free stuff, yeah. Free stuff on the street. Let's see what's in there. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I always make that
caveat emptor.
Yeah, I always make that joke whenever I see like a bicycle unattended. Hey, look, a free bike.
Yeah, well, I look at it and I think, that's an IED that somebody's left lying around.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we have to stay on our toes. Now, you said you had some more information about the white wolves to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just simply about there's this document that was circulated on the far right, and it's just called the White Wolves. And so it outlines. It's about 12 pages long, and it just sort of outlines a strategy for creating. I don't know. You probably are familiar with the phrase that I think was used in relation to the far right in Italy, called the strategy of tension, whereby political acts and bombings are carried out in order to influence the political climate in an authoritarian and confrontational direction. And so what the White Wolves was doing, just a bit like some of the Al-Qaeda documents, like, say, the Manual of Savagery, for example, is probably a similar example of that from an Islamist point of view, were setting out step by step that if you carry out these actions, and it also gave various security advice on, not keeping propaganda, not keeping stuff at home, which he didn't really quite seem to follow. But of course, you could read a document like that and kind of be inspired by it. And here's the thing. What was very interesting was that at the trial, there were just huge gaps in the official announcements as to what he was doing. Like, for example, before he planted his last bomb in Soho, he stayed the night in a hotel because he'd seen his picture in the paper on the Thursday night, so he thought, I better not go home. But he went out to the hotel and he phoned people. Nobody asked at the trial, who was he phoning? What was he discussing? He probably wasn't planning his next year's holiday. Then there's the question of, so there's all those kind of questions which, still there.
Now, you said that some theorists out there have a theory that he's a mind control subject, but you don't subscribe to that. But there is that theory. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, there is. I mean, and I suppose, it would say that. Well, I haven't seen really any evidence of it. I mean, at the trial, I listened to the evidence of the psychiatrist there, and there wasn't really anything in it or anything I've seen that indicates that he was anything other than a loner type neo-Nazi. But I suppose if he was mind controlled, then you'd have thought, not that I go down that road, but you'd thought then that you would they presumably would tell him to hang around with one of with his final bomb so he could be blown up with it. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. And then also, if there are these mind control things like the Manchurian Candidate or whatever, how long is this mind control supposed to work for? I'm not sure.
By coincidence, I have a guest tomorrow coming on. We're going to be talking about mind control. So I'll ask him if we have him coming on. I'll ask him about it. Now, what about these groups he was involved with? Did they ever come forward and make statements saying, yes, we're involved with this guy? No, we never heard of him, Heil Hitler?
Yeah, well, the British National Party said, he may have been a member, but we don't seem to have his records. Well, that's very not surprising. Some evidence did come forward that showed he'd been a member, because it showed him at a meeting a couple of years earlier where he was pictured right next to the leader, John Tyndall, when some anti-fascists attacked one of their meetings. So it was very difficult for the BNP to